got a lot to talk about. One thing I wanted to talk about, the name of the show is Brock Purdy, Tanner Mordecai, Spider-Man meme. I think a lot of people are assuming the worst with this title. But I do have something I want to share with you and get your take on. They do have a lot of similarities. And again, let me start off by saying I'm not saying that Tanner Mordecai is coming for Brock Purdy's job or that he's going to be as good of a player as Brock Purdy. But I did look at some things that I found interesting, and I'm thinking the Niners are probably were looking at this too. So, 48 games played for Brock Purdy versus 46 for Tanner Mordecai. 1,467 attempts versus 1281 for Tanner. 67 percentage versus 66 for Tanner. 81 touchdowns versus 85 for Tanner. 33 interceptions versus 27 for Tanner. 151 rate versus 148 for Tanner. 6'1", 220 for Brock. 6'2", 211 for Tanner. So very similar. And I just noticed this, and I wanted to point it out because to me, it seems like this is actually a compliment to Brock Purdy. 49ers looked at Brock Purdy and what he was able to do, and seems like they're trying to find another Brock Purdy to back him up. So I just thought this was interesting, man. Have you noticed the similarities between the two?
Yeah, so when you look at both quarterbacks, they're both similar in stature and size. Tanner Mordecai is 6'2", 218, and Brock Purdy is 6'1", 220. So that's pretty close. Mordecai is a little bit taller. And Mordecai actually had a pretty solid college career. SMU, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, got a lot of reps when he was at SMU, and he actually put up some really, really solid numbers. And then when he was with Oklahoma, when he was with Wisconsin, he wasn't able to start as many games as probably he had envisioned as a transfer and an experienced quarterback. But I'm intrigued by the skill set. He's not afraid to push the ball downfield. He can get aggressive in trying to throw the ball downfield to find the explosive play. At times, he can struggle with some of the short to intermediate throws underneath, and that's where Purdy has really just taken off, and a big reason why he's been so good in Kyle Shanahan's offense. What you can't really coach with Purdy, which is what has allowed him to be so productive so far in his NFL career, is just the processing, the touch, and the accuracy. And when you think back to when Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, the final pick in the draft, what a career he had at Iowa State. He made them a really legitimate program in the Big 12 under Matt Campbell, and it was not a football destination in a power conference, and Purdy won a bunch of games there. But going back to the strengths that he's been able to display at the NFL level that you can't always teach, it's processing, it's touch, it's accuracy, it's being able to layer footballs in there. And I think that Mordecai doesn't have some of those qualities and doesn't have the ability really to throw a touch, accuracy, and anticipation to the level of Brock Purdy. But you look at what he was able to do in a pretty solid sample size. 2021, he completed nearly 68% of his passes, 3,600 yards, 39 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. That's a great touchdown to interception ratio. And in 2022, 33 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So when he was able to play, he did produce. I do like the giddy up that he has when he does run. And I think that's an underrated element of Brock Purdy's game that, frankly, I'd like to see more of this upcoming season, where Kyle Shanahan calls plays because of the weakness along that right side of the offensive line, where Purdy can roll right and you clear up the vision a little bit. And he has that option to either throw or to run it. And with Mordecai, there were a couple of plays in which he'd keep it and he could take off a little bit and make some of those plays out of structure in kind of a Brock Purdy type of way.
Yeah, I think there's no question when they see Tanner Mordecai, they're just thinking, hey, maybe this guy can do something similar to Brock. I'm not saying this guy is going to be better than Brock Purdy or as good as Brock Purdy. A lot of the things that Brock Purdy does well, it's mostly, honestly, it's the mental part of Brock Purdy's game, and that can't be tested until you play actual games. So, there in no way am I saying Tanner Mordecai is just as good as Brock Purdy or he's going to be as good as Brock Purdy. I'm just making observations about who the 49ers are looking at for quarterback now, and I think it's changed because of the emergence of Brock Purdy. Dave Barkley says, sorry, Chase, didn't know you were here. Thank you. Dave Barkley's a big supporter of the show, man.
What's up,
awesome.
brother?
Yeah, man. So just interesting. I think what else is interesting is beyond Tanner Mordecai it feels like, and maybe this is a Super Bowl window thing, I'm not sure, but it feels like the 49ers looked at the experience and the media success that Brock Purdy had because of that experience in college and drafted every player that had that kind of experience. I think the only underclassman was Malik Mustafa, who's a
Yep.
junior. Everyone else was a senior, 5th-year senior, 6th-year senior sometimes. So I think there's a lot of Brock Purdy effects in this draft and with the UDFA signing of Tanner Mordecai. So we'll see. Do you think he can take over for Brandon Allen?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting camp battle. You know, the Niners did give a decent amount of guaranteed money to Josh Dobbs, just shy of $3 million. And I think that they like his ability wherever he's gone to step in a pinch, be somewhat productive for a game or two, as opposing defenses have been able to gather tape on Josh Dobbs. When you get beyond that type of sample size, that's when he struggled. But everybody knows the intelligence that he has. Aerospace engineer at Tennessee, quick processor. Last year with the Vikings, after they traded for him after the injury to Kirk Cousins, he gets there earlier in the week, barely had any time to grasp the playbook, and then he steps in against Atlanta and he throws for 300 yards. He accounts for 3 or 4 touchdowns. And with Kevin O'Connell, who's a bright offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan, he was relaying the play calls to Dobbs to that 15-second or whatever mark right before the play clock would start to dwindle down, where you can't have communication with the quarterback. And Dobbs is able to do a great job of putting the offense in a spot to be successful, and he produced there. So I like what Dobbs can bring to the table in that regard. If he had to replace Brock Purdy for an extended period of time, that's when I'd start to get a little bit concerned, because once he has to play past that threshold of a couple of games, that's when he starts to struggle, because he tries to make a lot of plays happen out of structure, improvisationally, and sometimes doesn't play on rhythm like Purdy does, which is why Kyle Shanahan partially loves Brock Purdy so much, because it's such a rhythm-based type of offense. So they give that money to Dobbs. Sam Darnold gets $10 million for 1 year to potentially be the holdover plan for J.J. McCarthy with Minnesota. So you save a lot of money not paying Sam Darnold that much money, but you only gave Brandon Allen about $1 million. So with Mordecai, better athlete than Brandon Allen, has a better arm, very experienced at the college level, as we just went through, the production has been pretty solid for him. And he just is more of an upside player as compared to the known commodity that Brandon Allen is. Backup for Joe Burrow, great. Respected in the quarterback room, awesome. But he's a limited player, and he is who he is, and he's been a journeyman up to this point for a reason. So do the Niners go that Brock Purdy route, as you mentioned, in a way of, and in a sense of, okay, Brandon Allen is what he is, known player. Mordecai, like Purdy, very experienced at the college level. Let's take a shot on a developmental player that we can try to get into our building and has intriguing arm strength, has intriguing athleticism, has played a lot at the college level, and let's see if we can develop him into a high-quality backup, because backup quarterbacks in the league are very, very important.
Absolutely. And I was at training camp last year. Brandon Allen had the worst arm on the team by far.
Yeah,
It's not
no
even
doubt.
close. He has a pea shooter, if I'm being honest. You mentioned the arm talent with Mordecai. Do you think Mordecai has a better arm than Brock Purdy, like as far as strength is concerned?
That's the thing with Purdy. Purdy has surprised a lot of people with his arm strength, I think. And the deep ball last year, I thought for the first time in Kyle Shanahan's regime with San Francisco, brought a different element to this Niners offense that we simply did not see with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't have the arm strength. He didn't have the touch, the accuracy, the feel to throw the ball downfield. And Purdy was one of the more accurate deep ball throwers in the NFL last year. Completion rate, and he was only 14th in receiver target separation. But on that deep ball, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at throwing the deep ball. That's part of the reason why Brandon Ayuk broke out, second team All-Pro, was second in the league in yards per catch, is because Purdy and Ayuk had that great connection on that deep ball. Now, does Purdy have a howitzer in the form of Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen? No, he's not a quarterback who's going to chuck it 70, 80 yards downfield with a lot of loft to it. but he is capable of throwing the deep ball with touch and accuracy. And that touch and accuracy, I think, can make up for the lack of velocity and throwing the ball far as yardage. And another indication, I think, of Purdy's arm strength is him being able to throw outside of the numbers. And in Kyle Shanahan's offense, a lot of his quarterbacks have lived between the numbers and between the hashes. Matt Ryan didn't have a bazooka. Jimmy Garoppolo, as we know, didn't have a bazooka either. But Purdy's brought a different element to Shanahan's offense with the ability to throw vertically, but then to make throws from one hash to the other across the field, as we saw in the playoffs. So he's underrated in that regard. I'd say maybe Mordecai, if we're going to make a baseball player reference, might be able to have more miles per hour on the fastball. But again, the lack of the miles per hour on the fastball for Purdy, and then overall just throwing deep like a Mahomes or an Allen, he makes up for that with the touch accuracy and then the processing ability, I think, to throw his receivers open, but to see those windows before the defense is able to react, whereas sometimes other quarterbacks across the NFL will try to fit that ball in there because they know they have the arm strength. Purdy can get rid of it a little bit earlier so that the ball gets there before the defense is able to get there.